Is that how you do it? I was told I barked wrong on a podcast this week. I was told it comes kind of from the chest. Didn't do it right? All right, well, we'll get it next time.
Let's give him a bark. Let's teach him how to bark.
Can I get one, please? Can I get one for everybody? I've had only 2 drinks and they were an hour ago, so I'd like to better a while. My name is Alex Kirshner. For your purposes, thank you, Josh, thank you. For your purposes, I'm the guy here who has never been to Athens, Georgia before. These 4 have been to Athens, Georgia for a minute or 2, I think. I host a college football podcast called Split Zone Duo. Thank you. Our longest standing partner, and people who are very near and dear to us, are the crew at Homefield Apparel. Josh, Connor, Krista, Whitney, the entire crew there. We love them. They have been incredibly good to me and us. So when they say you want to come and do a podcast with us in a live event, I'm like, oh, yeah, I mean, yes. When they say it's in Athens, I'm like, fuck yeah, like I've never been here before. This is extremely exciting. Can I say, I don't know, we're selling shirts, so I don't know if I can say that. So I'm honored to be here, but I do want to introduce these panelists who I think you're really here to hear from. Maybe we'll just go from my left and kind of go down the line. Tell everyone who you are.
Hey, Jim Wood, one half of mygodapodcast and contributor at DawgsCentral.
George Foster, former dog. Forget that former stuff. You know, always a dog. But I'm here in the capacity today from 100 Sanford Podcast. Open up your phones, go to wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe. We need to get those subscribers up. But yeah, 100 Sanford Podcast, and happy to be here this evening.
I am Graham Coffey, here with DawgsCentral, and also of 100 Sanford Podcast with George. Happy to be here, and thank you all for being here.
Hey y'all, I'm Jon Smith, John Tweet Sports, part of DawgsCentral and the Speakeasy Sports Show. Really excited to be here, and how about them fucking dogs?
So I did my first kind of big walk around Athens today, and like I've been on a lot of college campuses, but not this one, which is kind of embarrassing for someone who's covered college football for a long time. My first observation was that you guys really do not do Friday classes at the University of Georgia. Is that right? Like you really don't. And I've been to college. Like I understand it's kind of a fringe endeavor to have Friday classes, but like I didn't see a backpack when I was walking around Athens today. Not one.
Would you go to Friday?
If I went here, yeah. No, I wouldn't. Georgia, I mean, you played football for the University of Georgia, so I presume that means you could have played football somewhere else. I'm guessing they weren't the only offer. It's not typically how it goes.
Fortunately, yes.
What drew you here?
I remember it really felt homey. You know what I mean? It felt like family. The guys, my hosts, I believe it was Adrian Hollingshed and Chris Terry, and it actually was like a bye week, so it wasn't really busy down here, but it still felt. I'm from Macon, Georgia. Not the biggest place, not the smallest place.
Yeah.
Kind of right in the middle, and it just felt like home. I'm used to family and camaraderie, and like my cousins were probably my best friends, and it kind of felt like that. And I was also tired of the recruiting process. Even though this was only my second visit, and I was ready to make a decision to be done with it, and no better place than here, and it lived up to every expectation. Wish I could have got a natty, but I did finish with SEC championship, and that was good enough for me at the time. So my best decision ever.
My interpretation of it, covering college football from kind of 30,000 feet, is that the Georgia players who did not win natties while they were here, you were still part of it because you avoided like a tanking. Like if things get really, really bad, it takes a long time to dig out of that.
Yeah.
And you prevented that. You keep the program at a certain level.
Not only that, listen, I'm gonna give Georgia a little bit of credit. Those teams took Georgia from a place that was not. We've all loved Georgia our whole life. I have my whole life, but it was a tough, the SEC, you had Florida, you had Tennessee, you had like some real Alabama, you had some real powerhouses, and Georgia was kind of in that middle where we had good teams, but we could never quite get over that hump. But those SEC championships, it was not only building that foundation, but it was proving you can win at Georgia, which led to a lot of those things. So.
What you were mentioning about not getting to a tank situation, a lot of people might not realize this about Georgia and Georgia football is luckily, and you probably don't realize it because, you know, the expectations are so high. Georgia has never really been bad. Most schools have been bad before. And so I did like the math a few years ago, and I check it every now and then again to make sure I'm not tripping. Over the last 50 or so years, Georgia has won 7 or less games, maybe 10 times.
And how many of those were the first
Some people
year
would,
of a coach?
Kentucky would be happy with 7 wins. You know, Georgia has
Georgia
lost
names.
7 or less only 10 times in the last 50 years. And so that's longer than I've been alive and all that. So Georgia is lucky. You guys are lucky to never have really cheered for a bad team. You've had some teams you cheered for that didn't do as great as you would like them to do, but you've been lucky enough to never see a bad team probably in your lifetime, most of them.
Graham and Jim, I want to bring you guys in. I have, I'm probably going to say about 15 times today to every person I meet while I'm toasting them with gin and tonic. This is my first time here, like I just said, and one of the things that is striking about it to me as I walk around is that this is one of those college campuses that you kind of just immediately get, like if I was here, if I lived near here, I wouldn't want to go anywhere else. I felt that at 2 other places. One of them was Ann Arbor, which might get booed here, but you need to beat them, and UC Santa Barbara, which is a totally different deal. It's a beach. What is the deal like with Athens, Georgia? I mean, it is homecoming weekend. SEC beat writers, I know many of them, they refer to this as their favorite SEC town. Some say Baton Rouge, a lot of people say here. Heard Lexington today too, believe it or not. What is it to you guys that characterizes Athens, Georgia, and why this is an interesting place to be?
Yeah, I mean, you got everything, right? So you got college football, you got the great weather, you got the music scene here. Think of all the legendary music acts that have come out of Athens. There's always gonna be something to do on the weekends. I mean, you know, you go out, go to the Georgia Theater on Friday night, go see the Dogs on Saturday, come over here for a nice meal. You know, so many things to do. It's so unique. God, not to drop the Homefield shirt. We have a tree that owns itself. Like, come on, who else has that? You know, a tree that owns itself.
Yeah, for me, I grew up in North Carolina, but both my parents were here in the 70s and met here, and so coming down here, you could kind of feel the nostalgia from them sort of like rub off on my sister and I. My sister's 5 years older, and she came to school here, and so when I was in high school, I got to like come down and, you know, hang out with her, go downtown with her, and see what it would be like. All of my friends growing up, most of them wanted to get into UNC and go to Chapel Hill, which is it's a great college town as well, but I always was like, well, if you come to Athens, you get good football, you get the music, you get the downtown scene. I mean, I don't know what the number is now, but when I was like a senior in high school, I read somewhere that downtown Athens had like 70 bars in a 3-block radius at the time. And you walk out of like beautiful North Campus and you're right there. So, I mean, that's, you know, maybe a little bit too much insight to what I was looking for my college experience. But, yeah, it's a great place.
But it is kind of nice to go to a school where you think like, which bar am I going to go to tonight? Only when you're a senior, of course, when you're a junior.
Of course.
And you have a choice of more than 3 or 4. Some of us weren't that lucky.
No comment.
No, I know.
So Ricky wasn't going to bars because he had to be at practice, right?
Oh yeah, I was chilling.
One of the things that I've been very interested in watching Georgia football, watching Georgia fans, spending too much time on the internet myself over the last few years, is what happens to the psyche of a fan base in college football when you are this good. most of us are never going to know. I went to the University of Maryland. I'm never going to know. You are in a kind of special state right now. Most of the people here, there's 4 people on stage here who are, live and breathe Georgia football. Jon, is the fan base, does it feel like, do people feel invulnerable, like nothing bad could ever happen, or do they feel the most vulnerable, like something bad has to happen because it hasn't in so long?
I think you're either on one side or the other. I think a lot of the Georgia fan base, we experience this feeling called monsoon, which means no matter how good things are, Larry Munson, he would have these legendary radio calls, and there would be a minute and a half left in the game, and Georgia's up by 2 scores, and he's like, run clock, because there's this feeling like we still have a chance to lose this game. And I think there still is a little bit of that in the Georgia fan base, where it is like, we feel much better going into a game like we're going into this weekend against Missouri, where it's like, you got to come to Athens, you got to wind up, they're going to kick it off, and you got to play the University of Georgia. And that is a different feeling, I think, than a lot of us have had most of our lives. But there is this little bit of a feeling that's like, oh wait, at some point we're going to lose, and then what happens? And then so. But I would say, for me, I think most of the Georgia fan base is extremely joyful and locked in and really living in. I hear it when I talk to Georgia fans, when I see it on social media. That people really appreciate that this is the golden age of Georgia football. These are the good old days. We are living in the good old days, and I think the fan base has really come around to that, and it's been really exciting to see.
I think Graham says all the time, or he said before on our pod, that he wants people to enjoy what we're experiencing right now, because it's not, it's been good for a good while now. We haven't lost in 600 some days. But it hadn't always been this good, and it won't always be this good. He wants people to just enjoy, take it in. Should we happen to lose a game, so what? You know what I mean? It happens.
Alabama's lost 3 of them in the last 2.
I'm happy with where we're at. I have a different perspective in that winning football is hard. It's hard to win a game. I always tell people, like, if you look at the NFL, there's been one undefeated team. So every other team in the history of the NFL has lost a game before. So nobody wins them all, because it's hard. It's hard to win football games. So, if it happens to get a little sketchy tomorrow, which I don't think it will be, some people might disagree, but I don't think it'll get sketchy tomorrow, but if it happens to, relax. Just relax. Take a chill pill.
So I was at home spending time with some family before coming down here for this weekend, and I have a nephew who's 7 years old, and a couple years ago he discovered football, and he loves football, and he's kind of a little mini-me in some ways. And Wednesday morning he woke up after his trick-or-treating experience, and he asked my sister, what were the college football playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday night, and she told him that Georgia was ranked 2nd, and he burst into tears. And it was, it was really sweet. He's 7 years old, but like he was anxious that like Kirby might be upset, and like he was asking her all these questions, like, are the players okay? And, and I mean, like, you think about the window of Georgia football that he's seen. It is, back-to-back national championships, and I was in LA at the TCU game, as a fan, and I texted my sister and I was like, go wake up Max. Max is my nephew, and bring him downstairs when the score was, 50-something to 7, because I remember being a little kid and my dad waking me up for the end of the '95 World Series, and I didn't see another Georgia sports title for 26 years, I think it was. So I think what I see on our forums sometimes is people like looking for not the crack in the foundations. I think the foundation is built, but like looking for the canary in the coal mine maybe, and kind of like this linebacker, gave up this many yards to this tight end in this game, and that could come back to bite you somewhere down the road. And there's truth in that. And like you never know what the thing is going to be, like where that matchup's going to break down. And that's why I think we all get to create content. But I do think most people are still kind of riding off that high, because it's not just that there was 40-something years. It was the way that those losses stacked up year after year. It was, Pereira, Jordan here, like, Jordan was kind of the Charlie Brown of college football for a little while. And
26.
Yeah. I mean, I was at that game, man, and like, I just remember walking out, and the vibe of that was so depressing.
I was there.
Yeah, so it's good to be here, and it's good to enjoy it, like George said. Like, I think, you're on a run for possibly something that nobody's ever done, and I don't really know how you frame that because no one else has ever done it.
George, I'm curious. I mean, there's been one time this year where it has gotten sketchy for Georgia, which was the South Carolina game. So we're down 7 at halftime, 14? 14 at halftime. Yeah, 14-0 or something, 21-7. There was a viral video that came out where Kirby, gives a ball coach speech. I mean, it's a hell of a speech. Like, it's just some like Herman Boone, Remember the Titans speech making. And they cut it up with some nice music. And when you watch it after the game, I mean, surely like everyone in this locker room has to believe we're going to come back and win this game. And maybe because it was South Carolina. But I'm curious, and the players on the current team probably can't be totally honest about this. They're going to say, yeah, of course we believe. Like, when Kirby talks like that, in the rare case where they're down 14, you think they actually, they showed it, but you think they believe it in the moment? Or you think that's just football, they're just a better team?
100%. I think everybody, especially if you're fortunate enough to be on good teams always think they're going to win. 14 points is nothing. It's a lot if you're a bad team. It's almost a lot if you're an average team. When you're Georgia, you don't think you're going to lose down by 14 to South Carolina. Like, if anything, you're flabbergasted and it's like, this is a fluke that's happening. Let's break out of this fluke. You know what I mean? And his speech, like, it came true, like, almost down to another. This is the stat. These guys do the stat stuff. And wasn't it like everything was about?
It was, yeah. Georgia, he said we're going to get the ball 6 times, we're going to score 4 times, they're going to get the ball 6 times, they're only going to score once, and even that. Georgia had 7 possessions, but the 7th one was the kneel down. They scored in 4 of them. South Carolina didn't score at all.
It was exactly what Kirby said. He's the best in the game right now. He is.
I want to add one thing to that as well, because I think it's important to understand, Georgia football right now, and part of the reason that Georgia football is where they are is because Kirby's smart. The consistency with the way that you mentioned coach speak, a lot of it is coach speak, but it is so consistent. So there's a clip, if you go on Twitter, there's I actually posted one of these, but there's a clip where in the summer, Oscar Dell, tight end, was doing the media at the podium. And they said, how do you're approaching your 2nd year, and like, what are the expectations for Georgia and whatever. And he said, we're just taking it one moment at a time. We're blah, 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 basically whatever. And he used that one moment at a time. And Kirby Smart, in that halftime, he said, one moment at a time. He basically mirrored what Oscar Delp was saying in fall camp in the summer. And I think that's what, it's not only, it's a good team, good teams believe they're going to win, but when you have a head coach that is so consistent and has already had that in your head 3 months ago, that this situation is going to come and you're going to take it this way, and when those words come back, I think it does mean a little bit more in those moments.
And we've seen it build like year to year, season to season, right? I mean, it started off, we had keep chopping, right? We had keep chopping. And every year it seems to be like what's going to be the theme. And we've learned this season, Kirby takes this stuff seriously. Like, they're not just words, there's research behind it. And this year with Better Never Rest, right? I mean, they did research, looked at, one of the winningest sports programs in the history of the world in the All Blacks. And that's what they say is Better Never Rest. And that's, has been the motto for this year as well.
I think that's what you just pointed out, like, maybe is Kirby's genius and maybe the way where he's kind of starting to separate from Saban, who obviously had an incredible run of greatness, but his to kind of retrofit like the same message but make it fresh and new and interesting for the current generation that, you know, is a little shorter attention span maybe. That I think is, yeah.
It could be a little shorter.
Yeah, I mean, individual people might not fall into that, but on the whole, yeah, like Gen Z, it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's 30-second clips. I do the scroll all the time, right? So it's not just Gen Z, but yeah, I think that, like, going back to 2017, you know, it's a new one almost every year, and now they're getting kind of commemorated on t-shirts and hats and stuff, but I wouldn't take that for granted, like, as a Georgia fan, just because I think a lot of coaching tenures, they go south because the message gets stale and the guys stop hearing it.
I think Kirby has a bit of an advantage. He's typically coaches that are this great are a bit older, but he can relate. You know, I played with Kirby, and I'm not old.
Keep telling yourself.
But he has young
Young
kids.
George.
He has young kids. His kids are a lot younger than my kids, and he has to relate to those kids when he walks in his own door. You know, so kids are different. I have teenage kids, and they are weird. They are weird. There's no other word for it. They are weird. Sometimes I don't understand them, so I just have to take a deep breath and just get on with my day. And because they're odd people, especially this generation, odd people. I asked my mother, was I pretty good? She said yes. So I know this generation is different, you know, because we are not from the same generation. They're different kids, and he knows what makes them tick, and he just does a great job. Well, it's an underrated part of what he does, because everybody has athletes. You know what I mean? We have more than most, but there are a few teams that have just as many as we do, or could be more. You know, but he's the one holding the last two titles, and it's for a reason. It's what's on the other side of the white line too, as much as it is in between the lines.
Jim, one of the things that I'm interested in is that, and specifically interested in asking you guys, is that from afar, like when you cover the sport nationally, I think we sometimes flatten our analysis of a coach in Kirby's position and in Nick's position. I mean, there's really only two of them at this point that you talk about that way.
Yeah.
And we think about like the process, kind of like this ruthlessness, this consistency, the almost predictability of just getting people to operate something the same way and doing it well. It's interesting that George mentions age might be an advantage, understanding relatability to today's kids. What do you see that can kind of advance people's understanding of Kirby Smart and why they've been so good that takes you a little bit deeper than, they recruit, they get ball players, he can drop plays? Because obviously he can do that. Everyone knows that. It doesn't really advance your understanding of a head coach.
He's one of us.
It's a fit thing.
It's the number one thing. So,
Yeah.
and I'm going to give credit to my buddy Big Graham. He put out a video heading up the Florida game. And it's something that I got really happy when he did, because I had said the same thing in my podcast. I was like, ooh, Graham agrees with me. So, you know, Steve Spurrier, right? So Steve Spurrier hated the University of Georgia. Why is that?
Sure did.
And why?
You
Why?
hated him.
Because we did, but he hated us because we beat him in his Heisman year, right? That was the blemish on their record, and that drove him, and that fueled his hatred for the University of Georgia. And George talked about George played with Kirby. I didn't play with Kirby, but George and I, same high school graduating class. So that's when I was in college. Those guys, I mean, we all remember what it was like when Kirby played here. Kirby was on the field when they hung half 100 on us. And Kirby, he got to beat Florida once. He beat them once as a player. But he saw some bad some bad games against the Gators. He saw some bad games against Tennessee. He played some bad games against Auburn. So he knows what it's like. He knows what it's like to be in those shoes, and he knows what it's like to be in those shoes and wear that G. I think that is a huge factor.
He's won 2 national championships in a row. I remember that last year, around this exact time last year, this was probably the weekend of the Tennessee game last year, which was right around this time. I remember it was right after Halloween. A common point of analysis about Georgia was, well, yeah, they're great, but this clearly isn't 2021's team. Turned out they basically were when you looked at it at the end of the year, even if they didn't have quite as many guys who terrified you on defense. So the 2023 Dogs, I mean, no way they're as good as 2022's, right?
You say with this team?
I mean, that's what I've been led to believe, right? Every year, Georgia is somehow worse than the year before, and yet they never lose any games. That's what I'm told.
What I've been saying, and I promise you this is not all shameless plug, even though go subscribe to 100 Sanford. But I've said this on the show over and over again. This team, you know, obviously we've had how many 29 draft picks over the last
2 years.
2 years. You're not going to be the same team, obviously. Now, they might have the same number of draft picks in a few years after these guys grow up, develop, and all that. But as of right now, no, you don't have the same caliber of players. But I've always said this whole year that this team is going to win. They're just going to win differently. You know what I mean? So, yeah, they might not strangle teams out and give up 7 points a game. You know, they might give up 14 a game and then still win. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's a W. You know what I mean? Because they're gonna score more. They're gonna score more than any team can score against them. You know what I mean? And that's the name of the game. And I don't really care how it looks as long as the ending outcome is a win. You know what I mean? They're just gonna win differently. It's not that they're not gonna have 16 draft picks this year. Heck, these guys still got, milk behind their ears. It's a lot of youngsters on the team that's playing. But I still think they can get the job done with the squad that they have now. Fortunately, they just, they recruit very well.
Yeah, I think it's recruiting. I also think one of the least talked about and underrated things of Georgia the last few years is Kirby Smart's ability to keep continuity on his staff. So I don't know a lot of staffs that have won as much as Georgia has won and has lost key members of their staff and have kept key members of their staff. Usually you lose your offensive coordinator, you lose your defensive coordinator, then you're having to go find someone to plug in. What Kirby has done, Mike Bobo is the offensive coordinator at the University of Georgia this year. Mike Bobo was on the staff last year with Todd Monken, right? So that scheme, those things that he brought to the table, the way that the staff meetings ran, all those things, has now just moved up. You have Glenn Schumann, Dan Lanning went, you had Glenn Schumann on staff. And so I think that continuity on the staff is a very underrated thing that's not talked about enough with Georgia, because the talent is there. The team is going to win differently because it is not the same. It's younger talent in a lot of ways. It's, all those things. But the coaching, that hive mind of those coaches, when you get in those moments, that there's been continuity now for a few years that I think that's so hard to replicate when you see what's happening. Like Alabama's a good example where, and I'm not even, y'all know me on Twitter, I kind of give Alabama a little bit of hell, but I'm not even like throwing shade. Like when you have two new coordinators and when you have like a staff, like when you have that, I think you underestimate how long it takes for those guys to actually get on the same page and working together and figuring out game planning and all those things. And that's one of the other geniuses of Kirby that I think has been underrated, is his ability to kind of look into the future and say, oh, I might lose Todd Monken, so what is my plan? Who can I bring in? And he brought in Mike Bobo as an analyst and paid him nothing and then promoted him to offensive coordinator. So.
Yeah, I think not only does he do that with the big picture stuff like John's describing, but I think that happens in season more than we want to talk about sometimes. Like, I had joked with some people that Georgia's season started last week because Kirby is at a spot with back-to-back titles where, like, he doesn't have to beat UAB 56-0 to give proof of concept to the fan base or anyone in the athletic department. Like, he can use those games, he can use a road game at Vanderbilt to work on what they want to work on. And like, I promise you, there are some of these games that they go and play in, and people get stressed out because the score is maybe not as lopsided as they expected, or I think the stat was that, you know, prior to last week, the only spread they had covered all year was against Kentucky, and it's like, well, Kentucky was the first team that they really, I think, viewed as a threat, you know, like in some ways. I'm not saying that what happened against South Carolina and Auburn wasn't legit, because it is, but I do think in some of these lesser games, like, they put out younger players and they play a lot more, and they work on things that they maybe don't always run, and they are very vanilla. You're not seeing like pressure packages and exotic blitzes. They're just trying to get better at fundamentals, and they obviously want to win and need to win, but there's not as much concern over, you know, we're going to put the backups in when we're up 50. The backups are sometimes in when it's, you know, 14-3 in the second quarter. So I think that's made Georgia better, and I think, you know, in the framework of 2023, there's still a lot that's unknown in my mind over, you know, just how good this team is, especially, you know, unit by unit, because we don't really know yet. You know, you've seen probably just a small percentage of the playbook in a lot of cases.
I was interested in the idea that, you know, that Jon's putting forward about continuity year over year, sort of maintaining some flow from coach to coach when someone leaves. I think the corollary to that, or the other side of it, is, you know, the risk that you run sometimes is stagnancy. Look at Clemson this year. They're 4-4, and they're 4-4 because they do things the same way they did them when everything was clicking for them. You know, they don't use the transfer portal. They have gone, until this year, and granted they did make a change this year, they went internal hire after internal hire. They didn't lose as many coordinators as Alabama did, but they've done things the same way, and I think most people would agree it's really caught up to Clemson this year. What do you see as sort of the goal, Jim, of like, or the method, I should ask, more than the goal, that Georgia needs to deploy to not get high on its own supply and get stuck doing the same things even when other people catch up? Because eventually they're going to catch up. It's a copycat business.
Yeah, so I do think you can see how, what we've seen happen in Georgia, the way our team does adapt to the talent that we have at hand. So we talked about, you know, what's the difference between last year and this year, right? I mean, you can start at quarterback, right? So we all, I gotta say really quick, I'm really excited that Jon said Mike Bobo multiple times, and I didn't hear any groans from this crowd. So shout out to the crowd. You guys are awesome. Way to go. But I mean, like, we're running the same offense as last year, right? We're saying, but it's different, right? Carson and Stetson have a different skill set, right? So we're seeing them do different things. We're seeing them adapt. Again, on the boat, I mean, we're throwing the ball more now than we ever have in the Kirby Smart era. So run the dang ball, Bobo, I guess. I don't know. But I mean, I don't know. To me, it's that playing to your strengths and doing what your skill set is there. If you look at the defense too, right? I mean, different guys. The secondary, I think, is really one of the big strengths for us. So adapting to that.
George, when you look at this team, particularly on offense, like, are we seeing some version of an identity shift to you in the way that Kirby and staff want to at least play offense?
I think it goes back to what Jim just said. We use what we have, use the weapons you have. You know what I mean? So I think Beck is I like what little I saw from Beck is since he's been there. You know, even last year, spot duty. I come from a scouting background once I retired, and sometimes you have to get your information in snapshots. You know, so a little bit I saw from him, the little bit he's been playing, I was like, oh, he has some potential to be, you know, pretty good. You know, I like the way the ball comes off his hand. You know, he can make all the throws he wanted to make, and I felt like he was going to be good for us this year, and so far he has been. So why not use that? We got two really talented guys from the portal, you know, over the off season, to add to guys that we already had, you know, to add to the best playing college football and Brock Bowers. And then you got guys like Oscar Delp, who was a fantastic tight end coming out of high school, very good in the pass game. You got Ladd McConkey still on the team. Like that kind of leads to throw the ball. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna have this is college is heavily based. You might say duh, but college is heavily based on the Jimmys and Joes. And when you got that many Jimmys and Joes that are better than the next team, you're gonna win more times than not. And we have those guys on offense. You know what I mean? Again, you have some running back issues, with injuries at the beginning of the year. So you can't let that get you down. So we started passing the ball a little bit more.
You mentioned Brock Bowers. Graham, when we were talking before we came on the stage, you indicated to me that Brock Bowers might play football again very soon for the University of Georgia.
Not tomorrow soon.
But my main question is he insured? Does he have an insurance policy? Does he just love the University of Georgia? Like, why would he do that? But good for him, nonetheless.
I mean, I think he's just that guy, man. He's just kind of like a human golden retriever, I think is what Kirby calls him. He just wants to go play fetch, and if he can't play fetch, he's not happy, and he likes to play fetch in a Georgia uniform. I think that when he got hurt, the information that I was being told was a lot of his decision making on how to heal and what process to take with the doctors was like, how can I get back on the field fastest and play football for UGA? I don't know that that's what every potential future top 5 pick would do. I don't think that's what most of them would do, but I think he's just a different kind of kid in some regards. And I'm sure they have a very large insurance policy for him, but it seems like in addition to a lot of other talents that we may be talking in the near future about how he's a quick healer as well.
I'm sure that policy factors into decisions.
Yeah.
This is a part of the
just
business,
like
right?
you have just say for instance, he has a huge policy. He loves to play football. His injury. If I'm assuming that a re-injury would be the same as that injury, if I'm a GM, it's not going to keep me from drafting Brock Bowers. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a deal where if he wants to play, I don't think the risk is very high for something else bad to happen. Plus, these type of, I don't know how bad his injury was, but these type of surgeries are done so people can play faster. I've had a high ankle sprain before, didn't get any tightrope surgery, and my ankle was hurt for I didn't feel good for about 9 or 10 weeks. These surgeries are built for some guys, they come back in a couple weeks. You know what I mean? So, I never heard I've never heard the severity of his injury, so we don't know. I think all this was up in the air, and all the speculation was because he's such a prized prospect and he has a lot on the line. Otherwise, I feel like if he was this good as a freshman, so I feel like we wouldn't even be talking about this if he was a freshman. He'd be coming back this year, no doubt. Especially with a championship on the line, I feel like we wouldn't even be talking about this if he was a freshman. If this was 2021 and a championship was on the line, we'll be trying to put a calendar date on his comeback.
This is a bit of a relevancy question because I think you're 17-point favorites tomorrow, Georgia. But from a national perspective, this is one of the biggest showcases in college football this weekend. It's probably not going to have as many eyeballs as Alabama and LSU, but it's a pretty big game between two teams that have lost a combined one game. Your levels of worry, George, you already said you don't think it's going to get sketchy tomorrow, but John, on a scale like DEFCON 1 to 5, I think 1 is the worst. Where are you with the Missouri Tigers coming into Athens? Pretty good. Go wide receivers.
Yeah. For me, so this is what I'm nervous about is Missouri's going to come in. We saw this with Florida. Eli Drinkwitz is going to come in with a really good script, right? He's going to come in and he's going to have Eli Drinkwitz is a good offensive coach. He's got Luther Burden. He's got Brady Cook. He's got Cody Schrader. He's got some really good ball players, Theo East. He's got some guys who can really play, and so he's going to come in with a good script. And I think what's my only concern on the DEFCON scale is how much exposure is Georgia going to have in those first 25 to 30 plays that gives them an opportunity, gives Missouri any opportunity to actually adjust to that. So we saw it with Florida. Florida went down, took the ball, drive, scored a touchdown, right? After that, nothing. Because adjustments were made, shut it down. Florida did not have a Luther Burden, who is one of the best players in college football, who is a missed tackle rate that's insane. The guy, not only is he a great wide receiver, can create separation, but he's going to make you miss. And I think for me, when I look at this, my only concern is that piece. Now, if you ask me as, I'm trying to put on my own bias hat. If you ask me, as a Georgia fan, I mean, they have Mizzou on their jersey, as George said on the Samper podcast. So, if you think Georgia's 10-0 versus ranked teams in Athens in their last 10 games, have won them by an average of 31 to 10, you tell me what's going to happen when Missouri rolls in tomorrow. So I think from a national perspective, I think a lot has been made around what Mizzou has been able to do. But Mizzou, if you look, Brady Cook is trending down in some ways. There's some teams that are starting to figure out how to bracket Luther Burden to the boundary, and Georgia has all the players and all the depth to shut anything that comes out down. Now, if Drinkwitz, if he feels like his defense can actually make some stops and he saves some of those plays, that's the only chance that Mizzou has. You got your script. I feel like we can make some progress, and we're going to try to create a little bit of a slog, slow Georgia down. Maybe we, save some of our plays, but I don't think he can come in like that. So mine is DEFCON 6 if it's on a 5-point scale.
I'm impressed. I agree with all of your analysis. That was excellent. I think with Mizzou, the thing that I found when I was doing some of our preview content was you go through them as a team and you're like, oh, they do this thing really well. And then it's like, well, that matches up kind of exactly with what Georgia does really well. And then they do this thing really poorly. Like, for example, Missouri's tackles are very, very good. Interior linemen, the two guards in center, not so much. What does Georgia like to run kind of whenever they want to get pressure? They send Jamon Dumas-Johnson and Smile London right up the middle. Florida did a pretty decent job of blocking that at times last week, and Georgia kind of had to rely on pressure from the edges. I think that Missouri's offense, if you kind of get out of some of the cumulative statistics, shout out to our friend Josh Ancher at DawgsStats. He tweeted earlier this week that Mizzou has a 36% success rate against Power 5 teams when running the football, which is not very high. I don't think they can run the football on Georgia, and honestly, this has kind of been against character for a Kirby Smart defense, but that's where most teams have seen the most success against Georgia this year has been on the ground. The only teams that I've seen beat Georgia in kind of this form that were one-dimensional, they had number 1 picks at quarterback, and they had a couple first-rounders at wide receiver. I think Burton's great. I think Theo Weiss is really good. I even think Mookie Cooper is a good receiver. If you look at Brady Cook, a lot of his yardage comes down the middle, and it's like he's a pitcher that throws a really good fastball, and Georgia is a defense that's going to make him throw a changeup, and I don't think that he can really make some of those high-level throws down the boundary. So for that reason, I think this could get some of the same vibes as last year's Tennessee game for 21 Arkansas.
I don't keep up with spreads, but thank you for allowing me to, or I guess informing me of what the spread is, and that lines up with my prediction. from the other day. I said 38-21. That's your 17.
That's your 17.
And I'm sticking to it.
I just say, as far as like worry level, Munsoning is dead, so I don't Munson anymore. So I'm gonna go into San Francisco and cheer loud, cheer my dogs. Look, I mean, like last year they caught us off guard at their house. You know, night game, crazy environment. This is gonna be the crazy environment here tomorrow.
Also, this is homecoming weekend. What's homecoming at UGA? You guys a homecoming school? There are some schools that are like homecoming schools.
I can't.
Someone told me that this wasn't really a homecoming school, but let me tell you, she said, I don't think I'm going to make it to homecoming, and then what did she tell me last week? I'll see you on Saturday. I'm going to be here.
I can't really speak on that from a player perspective. I didn't get to go to my first homecoming until maybe 5 years ago or so, and I think I may have been to 2 total, you know, because we were playing when I was here, then went off to the NFL, and then worked out of town after that. So I don't know. These guys probably.
I'd say it is. There's some cool stuff that goes on. So we got like I know there's some Redcoats, some Redcoat alumni in the house. You got some Redcoat alumni marching band. They'll perform. You'll see some of the old former cheerleaders come in and cheer. The homecoming parade's always a big deal, but never as big as in 2001 when I picked up Larry Munson at his house and drove him to the parade. The year he was the Grand Marshal. So that's my homecoming story.
I didn't even know there was a homecoming parade.
Where is it? Just happened tonight downtown. I would say it's Missouri. So Mizzou actually is a homecoming school. They actually invented homecoming. If you look, look it up. Mizzou actually, it depends on how you define homecoming, but they have a whole thing on their Missouri University website about how they.
You did your research
about how they invented homecoming.
Now he just listened to my
Georgia.
podcast. I'm a Jon Smith.
Let me tell you now, if they do homecoming, it's probably not jamming.
It's not jamming, George.
I've been
No.
It was early, but when I was working for the Rams, I actually went to a couple games down there when I was working for the Rams,
Well, listen, they invented homecoming, and now I think they were Kentucky's homecoming, and now they're Georgia's homecoming. Switches to the wrong side. I don't think Georgia's a very big homecoming school. I do think a lot of people will be in town for the game just because people come to the games.
Well, I guess you don't need to be a homecoming school when
You have
people
70
want to come
bars
home
and
anyway.
radius.
Yeah, when people want to come home year round, you don't need to necessarily be a homecoming school. But it did seem like a big party up the street. It's been a big party here tonight. It's not over. We've got a few more hours here, and then I will personally be hitting the town with Josh of Homefield. I want to say thank you to you guys for making this really fun for me. And I do want to say thanks to Homefield for having us all here. I think I mentioned, clap it up for Homefield. Clap it up. They are good people and have done a lot to, I think, well, I mean, they've supported my podcast and your podcast, so I mean, it's probably the best thing you can do. But I think really what's important about Homefield is that these guys understand that on one level it's just t-shirts. They don't take themselves too seriously. But on the other hand, they know it's not just a t-shirt because it's a representation of something you care about. I think they understand how passionate people are about their college football, their college basketball, their alma maters in general. And that's why they put care into what they do. They make it quality stuff, fair price, they treat people well. I love hanging out with you guys. I'm happy to be here. Just want to say thank you to Homefield Apparel and to Josh, who's going to show me around Athens later tonight. I'm not going to try to keep up. And I'm just honored to be here. So thank you so much.
Y'all, listen. I want to say one thing. Subscribe to My God Podcast, the one that we're saying for DawgsCentral. Please go subscribe to Split Zone Duo. Alex did the It's a fantastic, it's a very thoughtful college football podcast that they talk about a lot of things that aren't talked about on some of the other shows. So please go do that. It's a fantastic show.
Thank you so much. Thanks all of you guys. See you around.
Thanks,
Go!
So